Hackers that broke into an Anthem database that contained information on 80 million of its customers won't have to work too hard to use that data. It turns out the company didn't encrypt it. The latest attack is raising concerns about how prepared healthcare companies are to deal with cyber attacks and whether they could increasingly become targets. Joining me with his take is Joe Loomis. He's the CEO of CyberSponse, which helps companies respond to security breaches. Joe, thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you.
So the FBI did warn healthcare companies last year that they could increasingly become targets. What makes them such rich targets for hackers?
Well, because really the healthcare industry is really one of the last large industries to really get with the program. You know, if you think about it, most healthcare organizations care more about patient, performance. They're not really looking at the protection of data. They really don't have a lot of internet-facing capability, unlike your financial institutions, like online banking. So they're really not thinking security of data, of internet connectivity, computers as kind of their operating days, daily, priorities. And so that's, to me, is the really important fact is that healthcare industry really is the most target-rich environment, because with a medical history and identity, it's worth 10 times as much as a credit card, it is. So you can open up someone's, a credit card against them. You can file a fraudulent tax return. You could file false medical claims. And so really you've got the ability to use one set of data for multiple different uses for malicious activity. Whereas with financial institution, getting a credit card or maybe a bank account number, really only serves one purpose. You can't do too much with it. But with that personal healthcare information, it's really the holy grail of all types of data.
Yeah, that's a good point, Joe. And you've worked alongside major companies like Sony and Apple, dealing as a cybercrime investigator for them. You've worked alongside the FBI in this investigations like these. How common is it for a company not to encrypt data? Are you surprised that Anthem didn't do this?
Not surprised at all. Encryption is extremely difficult to manage. Think about it, you've got patient data and you've got doctors who are relevantly not technical. And so how do you decrypt that data so that the doctors can easily review patient records? And then how do you re-encrypt it? And so you're dealing a lot with encryption management and key management, and it's extremely cumbersome because the competency in areas of the typical medical field isn't highly technical people. These doctors aren't rocket scientists. They're medical professionals. They're not used to running software programs and decryption and keys, et cetera. That's what makes it so cumbersome, is you get a lot of pushback from your user base. So if the hospital elects to move with encryption, then they ultimately take a risk of shutting down their own operation because no one can open up any records.
But the interesting thing, Joe, is you would think that the healthcare industry would be further along in this just because they face so many privacy regulations. But there are a lot of concerns that healthcare companies are using outdated software, outdated equipment. Is that something that you've noticed in the healthcare industry?
I've absolutely noted. I personally was in a major healthcare provider here in Arizona because my son actually got a collarbone break. And in there, every computer and every patient's room was running Windows XP. And Windows XP, as everybody knows, is outdated, no longer supported by Microsoft, and has a horrendous amount of vulnerabilities, as we've seen in the point-of-sale breaches that where Windows XP was one of the culprits. And so now you have major hospitals, even in my own backyard, where I cannot believe they still are running antiquated product.
And Joe, Anthem's second largest insurer here in the U.S. I'm sure there are a lot of healthcare companies watching them today thinking, we don't want to be where they are. What tips do you have for those in the healthcare industry so they can avoid a similar situation?
I think you take the news right to the board level decision and you ask them for a security budget, and then you go out and hire an assessment team, look at your security posture, analyze your gap analysis, and then start the road to recovery, because either you prevent it now and try to protect yourself, or you're going to be a victim like Anthem.
All right, Joe, really great advice there. Thanks very much for being here.